All right, we are live. Awesome. I want to go over the next paper, which is exactly what we've been talking about, textual analysis. So, entertainment as political is the name, just like our module. Let's go ahead and look at the prompt. Okay. So, through our look at semiotics, we've seen that entertainment can be political and carry with it its own connotations. Now is your chance to contribute to the conversation with a cultural analysis of your own. Ooh, what could this be? Write an essay that examines a cultural entertainment artifact. It could be like a movie, a book, a video game, TV or Netflix series episode, a music video, a comedy sketch, a satire, a children's book, a picture book, a children's book cartoon. And just like what we've been talking about, we're going to unearth the ideological work that said artifact does. So when we say ideological, consider what ideas or values are glorified, what ideas or values are vilified. So in works of fiction, like I said, there's always a character that represents something, a value and attitude. So if you're reading a story where the protagonist carries an idea of virtue and nobility and kindness, and then therefore those are the values that are being glorified by the author by creating the protagonist, by giving the position of protagonist to that individual with those traits. And then conversely, the antagonist, what if it's someone who's very impulsive, violent, greedy, then those are the traits that are being vilified, and thus by virtue of the fact that that's the antagonist, right? So here is a way of thinking about it. One is like, okay, if you notice like a plot point, like for example, that can be everything from what the characters are like, what the setting is like. If you're looking at maybe a story that maybe it's like you look at, because there was another class of mine that we were looking at children's books, and they brought in one story that was about the historical time of the Japanese internment camp. Yeah, Japanese internment camp, specifically Manzanar. So they were looking at how the book was representing and portraying that historical period through its use of illustration, through its use of through its use of the text itself, the characters themselves. I got a big one for you too. So I notice always that in like Batman the animated series, I'll just be very specific. The villains always have some sort of physical scar or burn mark or deformation. Just look at Two-Face, right? Half of his face is burned. Look at Mr. Freeze, right? Look at what's his name? Joker. He has a so very much Batman and a lot of superheroes use this trope of representing people with disabilities as always being vilified and with very negative attributes, and that's really problematic actually. So maybe I'd be interested in that, or another one too. Like I don't know if you guys ever caught this, but X-Men. X-Men actually has a lot of parallels with American civil rights. So with the whole X-Men series, it's all about they're going for mutant rights, and just there's Professor X, who leads the X-Men, and his ideology of pacificity and nonviolent resistance for better mutant rights and integration was aligned with like Martin Luther King's, right? And then Magneto, who also is vying for mutant rights, he has more of an alignment with Malcolm X, so more militant by any means necessary. So if you see like connections to history, then absolutely that's a rad point. Like maybe that could be your whole paper's project to demonstrate how how X-Men has connections with American civil rights or anything else that you might discover. Another one that I've seen is Winnie the Pooh, how the Winnie the Pooh characters have different mental issues. So Winnie the Pooh is like eating disorder, Piglet, anxiety, the rabbit, OCD, what's it called? the owl dementia. I don't know, all sorts of things. But the point of this is that choose something narrow. Don't be like, okay, I like the band Rage Against the Machine, so I'm gonna look at all their music. No, look at one track. Look at one track. Look at one music video. Just narrow your focus. Don't be like, okay, I'm gonna do all of the Twilight Zone. No, choose one episode. Like, narrow your focus. Okay. A well-tended garden is better than a large room full of weeds. Narrow your focus. Another one is the resolution. So in fiction, there's always a conflict, and the way that the conflict is resolved is the ultimate ending of the fictional work, right? And you're left with the ultimate takeaway message. So, okay, if the takeaway message is X, or in case we're talking about Y, if the takeaway message is Y, what's the implication of that? So what? Is there a group that is more benefited than another? I actually have a good one. So there was an I Love Lucy episode called Job Switching, and so Ricky and Lucy, they're arguing about how essentially Lucy's spending all the funds, and the argument is Lucy, if you entered the workforce, you wouldn't be able to survive, you wouldn't do well. And then conversely, Lucy says, oh, if you try to do some work here in the kitchen and in the home, then you wouldn't do so well. So they trade places, and that's the episode where Lucy tries working at a chocolate factory. She's trying to keep up to wrap the chocolates, and she makes a mess of things. And then Ricky's also trying to cook, and then his chicken just kind of explodes and gets stuck on the ceiling. And the point is that the resolution is both botch their ventures up. Lucy is not successful Lucy and Ethel aren't successful entering the workforce, and then Ricky's not successful at trying out cooking and things like that. And the episode just kind of ends well, I guess that's just how it is, huh? It's whoa, but it's kind of problematic because, hey man, men absolutely should and can cook because just like women, we eat too. So same thing with cleaning. It's good to have a clean place, and we should clean and do all those things. There's no you shouldn't say only women should be able to cook. No, if you like cooking, then cook. Same thing. Women can enter the workforce just as well as men, because they're the other half of humanity too. And if you want to work, then work. If you want to cook, then cook. But kind of the episode just ends whoa, it just ends on that note. So consider the so what, right? If something is about the resolution. So those are just some ideas for what you can think of. Here's just some guiding questions. So who's the protagonist? Just want to remind you, the protagonist is essentially the star character of the story, and what traits, what attributes do they have, and then thus by extension, okay, well, what are the traits and attributes that the protagonist is representing? Thus, what are the attributes and values that are being hoisted on high? And you can look at children's book. I really recommend that. Look at a children's book. I know libraries are closed today, but maybe you have a son or daughter, and maybe they have some picture books you can look at, or you can go on YouTube and see how someone reads a picture book or a small cartoon. I love Dr. Seuss for that, which is actually part of our module for this week. Okay, so who's glorified, who's vilified, what are the values that these characters might represent? What does it say about the artifact's larger message? There's some ideas. Is any group affected by this message? Man, I'm gonna be real with you. If you look at some old cartoons, there's some very racist things. For example, how they some racist things. They portray black people in I don't know, just under a very negative light, and I don't know, man. There's just some racist things. And, I mean, we look at it now through this lens. It's yo, that's not cool. But the point. How did I even get into this? I got into this because sometimes cultural artifacts, their depiction of a certain group can be very harmful to one group, and it's hoisting on high another. So again, what we saw in propaganda and in rhetoric, thus operating with a binary, and it's like, yo, that's pretty problematic. Or yeah, so maybe that's just one example. So yeah, there's a lot you can do, and honestly, I think what's harder about this is that because a cultural artifact, there's like so much going on, you first have to go through a series of like where you're taking notes for things that you notice, and then you'll see like what you're really drawn to, and then focalize your attention upon something. Because remember, to have a thesis is just an argument or claim about something. And I think that the brainstorm is going to help a lot with knowing what it is that you want to say, and it could just be as simple as like, okay, well, what's the takeaway message of your cultural artifact? Like if you're going to look at, for example, the picture book, the Shel Silverstein one called The Giving Tree, right? And you can talk about like what the ultimate takeaway message from that is, and then how the book evidences that, and then maybe connections to real life, and then why that's significant. I think that's a good idea. But there's a lot you could do as long as you focalize your attention upon something, and I think this module is going to help a lot, and so will your brainstorm. So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, like, yo, I haven't really done this, don't worry, this module is going to help, and I'm here to help too. Okay, so this is at least 3.5 pages, double spaced. The points are, as usual, 20 points. We're going to do our peer review workshop, which actually is already May 1. So if you look at the calendar, so today is already, 20th? Oh, it's officially midnight now that I'm recording this. Okay, so anyways, yeah, so it's going to be not this weekend, but following Friday. So not this Friday, but so basically 2 Fridays from now, May 1. So and then that's when you're going to have a rough draft that you're going to turn in for that day. Yeah. So right now, just focus on the brainstorm, which I'll explain what that is. I want to see if my mic is not. I still have battery. Very good. Okay, so here's the student sample essays in the page, so check those out. Some examples, if I recall, there's WALL-E, there's X-Men, which is what I was saying. There's a Rage Against the Machine song. One student actually did a Sublime song. What was it called? It's basically about LA riots, and they were demonstrating how they were pointing, because it was like about how there's historical connections with LA riots, and how that Sublime song is portraying that historical time. And so yeah, what was it called? Let's see, Sublime song about LA riots. What was it called? I know I've heard it. April 29, 1992. Okay, so check it out, guys. If you want, okay, so get your notepad, and watch the music. Okay, print out the lyrics, get your notepad, and actually maybe first go through the lyrics, underline things that you notice, and take your marginal notes, and essentially respond to the lyrics. If there's any historical connections, like so what, you can consider also like portrayals, like what figures glorified, what figures vilified, how is it being done, and then obviously your responses. Then you can watch the music video. So visually, how are the visuals coalescing to bolster what the lyrics are saying? So what's happening visually that is supplementing what you see on the actual text itself. So like this is your chance, guys. If there's ever been like a video game that you really loved the story of, like for me, Undertale, like that was so rad. There was one student wrote about. It was called the Stanley Parable. It was about how like essentially like, you could feel trapped in a cubicle in a lot of like corporate America a lot of jobs in corporate America. That was their comment on video games. So there's a lot of indie games that are pretty profound, actually. So if you've been into video games, you could do that. If you're into graphic novels, you could choose one. If you're into anime, then choose an episode. But that's the main thing, is to narrow your focus. If you're really into a band, then choose one song or music video. I think music videos are rad because you can look at both visuals and what's happening with the actual lyrics. So there's a lot you can do, and like I said, this module is going to help a ton. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is the brainstorm. First one is the directions. Okay, so check it out. So basically, just like we saw with our textual analysis lecture, denotation, surface level meanings. Here's some things like plot points, plot developments, conflict resolution, character settings. Like what do you see as a symbol, a color, a golden quote, things that stand out to you. So basically, denotation is just like you're just taking notes and you're looking at something at surface level. But then comes in with connotation. Okay, so what? What's at stake? What is indirectly suggested? Who's affected? What do the symbols mean? What do the characters mean? What do they represent? What ideas do they represent? Social cultural overtones, emotional meanings, indirect suggestions. As my semioticians, you're ready for this. Connections to real life. So what? Why are they significant? How is those historical moments represented? How are they portrayed? Are they portrayed under a positive light, a negative light? Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? What traits does the good guy have? What traits does the bad guy have? Thus, what values or attitudes are being hoisted on high, and what attitudes or values are being vilified? There's a lot you can do. But essentially, ultimately, it comes like, okay, here's a detail I notice, and then the indirect suggestion, that's the connotation, so deeper level. I think this will help your thinking. So that's actually part of what you're going to be doing with, we're going to open this with this worksheet here. This is what it's going to look like. This is what you're going to actually be doing. So it's a T-chart here. One side is denotation, the other side is connotation. So literally, take a pen, take a paper, take a pen, and if it's a music video that you're going to do, then take notes, things that stand out to you, which is to be the denotation side. And it's just like we did with the textual analysis lecture. You're going to be considering for each of those points their connotation, right? And you guys know what that means now. I think also it's pretty easy and fun to do it because they're pretty short too. But they're really packed with a lot. Is like a picture book, right? I think we're gonna have time to do that. But yeah, so you could choose a picture book or just like a cartoon of someone reading a picture book if you don't have the book. But it would be best if you had it, or you could get like a PDF or something. Denotation, connotation. These are just going to be your notes. So if you want full credit, you need to have stuff on the denotation side, stuff on the connotation side. Please don't make it just 3 things. Like, really go ham on it. Like, this is your turn of brainstorm. Like, we don't even know what it is that we want to say unless we get our ideas out. That's the whole point of this. That's how the writing process works. And then if you want credit, also, you need to have an actual thesis here. So here's tell me what your cultural artifact is. Like, let's say you're doing Undertale video game, and then your thesis. And here's the thing: this essay is not just you giving me a summary of something. Use plot points to bolster. Like, if you're seeing like a larger, say, like a larger message of the movie. Let's say if you're doing it on a movie, okay, the larger message of the movie is this, that, and the third, then you use plot points to demonstrate just how that larger underlying message is brought to the fore by the director, okay? So it's not just like tell me a summary, tell me what WALL-E's about. Like, tell me like, well, it should be grounded on connotation. Your thesis should be grounded on connotation. All right, let me actually go ahead and close this. I want to resume here. If you're like, man, this is kind of crazy. I haven't really done this, but here's a suggestion for how you might, for a cool way that you can think about it. Like a way to think, like the sequence. Maybe, okay, first of all, identify what the cultural artifact's message or project is. Like if I was going to read The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, then I could say something like, how it's demonstrating how throughout our different stages of our life, our needs are changing, or maybe actually I'm more interested in the figure of the tree as like a maternal figure. So you can look at that, and how a good parental figure or will offer guidance throughout and support throughout or something, which is what the tree does if you guys haven't read it. How your cultural artifact showcases this larger message or project, connections to real life. So what? Like, why it's a big deal? Why does it matter? Like, don't just tell me, okay, here's what happens in the story. Like, okay, why? Why is that significant? Why is that a big deal? That's a good way to think about it. I think now that we're having this quarantine, there's like a lot of sci-fi episodes that can have a lot of parody with our current life. Like you look at Twilight Zone, and other sci-fi. I think like maybe like Black Mirror might have stuff. I'm not sure. I really haven't seen Black Mirror, but just students have told me about it. They said it's kind of like Twilight Zone, but I haven't really seen it. I've seen more Twilight Zone. Star Trek. Oh man, I really like Star Trek. So maybe you could just, like I said, the point is to just choose something that you like. Here, like I have an example for you. I looked at the Lorax. I don't know if you've ever read the Lorax by Dr. Seuss. But here is a working thesis that I created. So look at this. So you obviously need to introduce like what the source is, who's the author. So in this, okay, so remember my thinking, which is here, cultural artifacts, message, or project. So that's what I do here. In this story entitled The Lorax by Dr. Seuss, the writer forwards a perspective of eco-criticism. Through this view, the ideal of industry is vilified by way of the antagonist, who is known as the Onceler. Conversely, the ideal of nature conservation is celebrated as embodied by the story's protagonist, known as the Lorax. This message for the importance of nature conservation is just as significant today as it was back in 1971 when Dr. Seuss wrote this story. So this is just like initial thing, like where I consider, okay, the protagonist has these values, the antagonist has these values. Here's why it matters, but it's just like a start. So choose something that you really, really, really care about. I think that's going to make all the difference in the world. And so you're going to upload your brainstorm here, and I think this is going to help you a ton. And actually, check this out. If you're like stumped, you can actually do it on this video. Like if you like, because this is what this task is. This is what discussion board is. You're gonna grab a sheet of paper, grab a pen, and watch this video, and you're gonna take notes of things that you notice. Everything from golden quotes, everything from what you see visually, everything from things that are maybe jarring, which is denotation, and then, you're gonna come up with some sort of thesis based on this. So like essentially like a good place to start is like, okay, well, what's the overall message? What is this about? What is the takeaway? And then how is that overall message represented through the story? And then beyond that, why does that matter? Why is that important? Why is that a big deal? Are there any connections to real life? Because that's the thing about fiction is that there are often a lot of connections with real life that they have. This one, the Sneetches, absolutely has connections to real life and society. Absolutely, absolutely. So check it out. And I think this is going to spark a lot of ideas. And if, like I said, if you like this story and if you like the thesis that you can come up with, then absolutely create that into an essay, and that'll be your entertainment as political paper. Like if you really dig this, or maybe you can check out other stuff from Dr. Seuss. Like he has a lot of profound things like that just went over our heads when we were kids, but now we can revisit. And then obviously also reply to at least one classmate. I know I said a lot. If you guys have any questions, please reach out.